tweeted to Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know. I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism.
But the second you're like, well, actually, it's the Jews. First of all, it's against my Christian faith. Like, I just don't believe that, and I never will, period. And second, then it becomes a way to discredit. That's when I was like, this guy's a Fed.
Well, as you just saw from that video, Tucker Carlson had a sit-down interview with Nick Fuentes, who's obviously a very controversial figure. And I was happy to see that they had a back and forth about their differences on how they discuss Israel and what's being carried out in Gaza. I am certainly more in agreement with Tucker Carlson. I do not blame the Jews, but I do blame a certain ideology and a certain government that has carried out the atrocities that we've seen in the Middle East, not just during this genocide in Gaza, but over the last several decades. That you have Nick Fuentes and he thinks that there's an organized Jewry that is essentially leading to the situation that we're seeing right now on the ground in Gaza. Again, I agree more with Tucker Carlson. I'm just recounting that part of the discussion in case you missed our coverage of it, because we talked about that yesterday. But there were other parts of their conversation that I thought were worthy of delving into. I wanted to share with you, including this really interesting experience that Nick Fuentes allegedly had with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. So this is all taking place when Nick Fuentes is still in high school. He's like around 18 years old. He's a curious person, he's a self-identified libertarian. He debates someone, and apparently that debate he performed really well in. And then he gets approached by someone who I'm actually familiar with. Her name is Cassie Dillon, who works over at the Daily Wire. She was impressed, and then there was like this effort to essentially recruit Nick Fuentes. Now, there's more to the story, and I wanna let Fuentes set it up for you, so let's take a look.
Barack Obama in the lame duck period, so the Democrats lost the election, he's on his way out. There's a resolution of the Security Council condemning the settlements in the West Bank in Israel. And typically, the US delegation will veto those resolutions condemning Israel. Well, Obama's on his way out, he's got nothing to lose. So the US delegation abstains from the resolution and it passes. And Fox News and all the pro-Israel conservatives are calling him an anti-Semite. They're saying he hates Jews, he's an anti-Semite, he hates Israel. I said, how is it anti-Semitic to just be consistent on our US foreign policy? I tweeted about it. I tweeted to Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know, I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism.
How is that? First of all, dual loyalty exists. I said it exists. There are Americans in this country right now, self-identified American Jews, who seem to be far more concerned with the well-being of a foreign country, and that foreign country is Israel, as opposed to the well-being of this country. Ben Shapiro is a fiscal conservative who's very concerned about our entitlement programs like Social Security, programs that we pay into as Americans, so we can maybe one day retire and not be destitute. He thinks that we spend too much money on that program and healthcare and all that. But when it comes to bribing Egypt to play nice with Israel, money well spent. $4 billion a year to Israel, money well spent. $30 billion since October 7th to help Israel commit its atrocities in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, money well spent. Our tax dollars working for us, the American people, what a waste. We're in debt. I'm not gonna believe a single politician or pundit in this country, left or right, when they say they are concerned about our debt as they just funnel more and more of our resources to a foreign country. Dual loyalty exists, and that's not anti-Semitism. It's a fact and it's reality. Never thought I would see the day where I would, I guess, defend Nick Fuentes over the ridiculous smears of Ben Shapiro. You know, Israel effed up big time by carrying out what they've been carrying out over the last 2 years. Because for the first time in my lifetime, I'm seeing Americans ask questions and actually effectively push back against these talking points that had silenced people previously. But there is evidence of dual loyalty, and there's nothing anti-Semitic to call it out. Now let's watch Fuentes explain how he actually used to have a very good relationship with the folks over at the Daily Wire, and then he started asking what they referred to as the wrong questions.
I was friends with a lot of the Daily Wire writers, not just Cassie Dillon, but many of them were Jewish. And I would ask them point blank, I would say, so why do we give Israel all this money? $3.8 billion per year, what is that for? And they would say, well, you know, there's a really good answer for that, but you're asking it in the wrong way. You're asking it in an anti-Semitic way. I'd say I'm asking for the proof. You know, what's the argument there? And so first it was the sort of, hey man, could you kind of tone it down? Maybe just don't bring that up so much. But I was persistent because at this time I was genuinely inquisitive. I wanted to know, is there an actual reason? And I was actually expecting that there was a really good reason for all of it. And the more that I read, the more that I dug into the subject, the more I found out there's a lot of these neocon Jewish types behind the Iraq war. There's the foreign aid complex, which is really unique. There's AIPAC, which is this intense foreign lobby where it's bipartisan. It seems to be the only thing that the parties can agree on. And so it just made me burn more with curiosity. So I just kept asking them. And eventually they said, you know what? We're not going to talk to you anymore.
Oh, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to ask those questions. Okay, this is a side note, and I know it's going to take away from the commentary a little bit, but you got the sniffles, bro. You got to do something about the sniffles. Okay, it was really distracting, but putting that aside, no, he was asking the right questions. In fact, I wish more Americans asked those questions. And the way that they tried to bury him for asking those questions is super sus. Why? What's wrong with asking, why is it that we fund Israel to the tune of $4 billion every year? And then of course, there's always like supplemental funding that pops up out of nowhere. Like the random $1 billion in extra funding that AOC allegedly didn't want to vote in favor of. Then she voted present and then cried on the House floor and embarrassed progressives in this country with how pathetic she is. Sorry, I know that's a harsh thing to say. I'm supposed to be very rah-rah about the progressives in Congress, except when push comes to shove, they do a lot of unprogressive things, like provide Israel with an additional $1 billion in funding when we're already giving them $4 billion a year in military aid. He didn't ask the wrong questions. The problem is he asked the right questions in the wrong environment. In an environment where the dual loyalty certainly does exist. And no one's gonna stop me from saying that, because it's the truth. It's the truth. Let's pivot to a more amusing part of the discussion. Because Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes had a bit of a tiff earlier this year. They both accused each other of being feds. It was hilarious. And look, Tucker Carlson also said that, you know, Nick Fuentes is like a gay kid living in his parents' basement, whatever. And so that really upset Nick Fuentes. He did a whole broadcast about it. It blew up and everyone was like waiting for this moment where they would, you know, hash it out. And they did. So Carlson repeatedly urged Fuentes to let go of his grudges against his perceived enemies. And that led to the two of them basically focusing on their recent feud. So let's watch the clip and then we'll explain the backstory a little more.
Look, Tucker, that's why I'm sitting here, you know?
Right.
I mean, because we had a contentious dialogue.
Well, I thought you were a Fed.
I thought you were a Fed.
I was a Fed.
Yeah.
I'm not a Fed. But whatever, I don't care what people
Yeah,
think.
we showed each other a badge as we know well.
No, but I thought you were a Fed because I was like, why not? It's not cucking to say you're not talking about all Jews when you oppose a foreign policy position. It's not. There's nothing liberal about that. It's just true. That's the Christian position, okay? And two, why are you attacking like the best people and not the worst people?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, he disavowed me for my views on Israel and said I talk too much about white people and Christianity. And to me, that's like a sincere ideological disagreement.
I get it.
Okay, so the guy that they're talking about is Joe Kent. That's who they were feuding about. So he's a Republican who ran for the House in Washington. In Washington's 2022 and 2024 elections. He did lose both times. And according to Fuentes, many years ago, Fuentes privately gave Kent the support of both himself and his organization's political resources on the condition that Kent would never publicly disavow Fuentes, which I think is a ridiculous ask. You never know what the future holds. What if Fuentes does something terrible? I think Kent should be allowed to disavow him, right? But later, Kent did just that after Marjorie Greene attended Fuentes' conference back in 2022. Okay, look, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, here's what I do care about. The reason why Tucker thought that Nick Fuentes was a Fed is because when you have critics of Israel specifically blaming the Jews and spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric, those of us who don't think it's the Jews and instead specifically blame a government and those who adhere to a certain ideology, we get lumped in with the likes of Nick Fuentes or whoever says disgusting anti-Semitic things about Jews, and that discredits us. And so many think that figures like that are Feds meant to intentionally discredit those who have legitimate criticism about Israel. So that's why Tucker Carlson thought he was a Fed. Now, is he a Fed? No, I don't think he's a Fed. I think he's I think he got his start very young. I think he's on the record saying a lot of terrible things. I think he's trying to be, or was trying to be, some sort of edgelord. And in a lot of ways, that destroyed his reputation. When in reality, if he didn't feed into that gross, hateful rhetoric, and not just about Jews, about women, about all sorts of people, he's actually not a dumb guy. He makes cogent arguments. He seems to be well read, and he would be far more influential if he didn't cave into or give into that rhetoric. Now it's gonna haunt him for the rest of his life. And this is why, look, if you have kids, they're teenagers, they're online, just sit down and talk to them about, hey, everything you say will exist forever. And it will haunt you for the rest of your life. So yeah, look, people are upset that Tucker Carlson had a sit-down interview with Nick Fuentes because of the statements he has made on the record. I don't think anyone should dictate who anyone should or shouldn't be allowed to talk to, but I also understand where the rage and fury is coming from because Nick Fuentes has definitely offended a lot of people by saying some pretty disgusting things. I think people can be redeemed, but there needs to be an apology. There needs to be an acknowledgement. Hey, I was a moron, I grew, I changed, I matured. I personally haven't seen that. But I do think that having these types of conversations are still worth it because we get a little bit of insight into not only who Fuentes is, but the experiences he had with conservative organizations trying to groom him for their own purposes, and then rejecting him and attempting to bury him the second he asks questions that they deem to be inappropriate, which actually happened to be very appropriate. So I don't know what to make about Nick Fuentes. What I do know is, regardless of how much you want him to go away, he's not going away. This guy had 300,000 people watching one of his live streams recently. He's blowing up. And if you want to know why he's blowing up, look no further than our government's fealty to a foreign government that's currently carrying out atrocities with our resources. If you think my commentary about what Israel has been up to in the Middle East is what is leading to anti-Semitism in the country, how about maybe consider the actions of the Israeli government? Because believe it or not, people around the world do not rejoice in the endless imagery of children with their limbs blown off, or parents picking up their children's body parts and putting them in plastic bags in Gaza. People see that and they get angry.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.